Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is leave a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Tony Martignetti. He's an author and a chief inspiration officer. He focuses on your purpose and on burnout. He's going to give you the 3 words that start with the letter C to help you find purpose. And he's going to tell you what question you should be asking when you're burnout. And it's not, what should I do? Tony Martignetti, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. Very excited to get to know you today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Some folks probably already know who you are and some folks don't. But could you tell us just a little bit about what you do?
Sure thing. So first of all, I'm a coach, an author and leadership advisor who works with people in tech and other industries to help them to make an impact and make a meaningful impact in the work that they do, but without burning out. I often say that I help people stay grounded in chaotic times because I feel like we're always navigating these chaotic situations, but we have to know how to, stay in that place of how to be the calm in the chaos. So
love that.
That's what I help people do.
I always find either I'm interviewing someone that's like I've known for a while or I'm just meeting. So you're in the just meeting category. Did you yourself have a time of burnout to have to come through that? Is that part of why you're passionate about this?
Absolutely. It's funny that a lot of the times our gifts they come from us looking backwards and seeing, wow, that this is where it comes from. It comes from my own journey. Mm-hmm. I went through a period of very dark burnout and really on a crisis point that have really defined my gifts into the world, if you will. I call them flashpoints because that's something I use in my books and also in my podcasts. These points that define us, that reveal our gifts into the world. And my first burnout point was, going through my time in biotech. I worked as a leader in biotech, where I was spending a lot of time just working really hard, almost to the point where I was not really taking any breaks and spending time with family and kind of lost connection with life.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where even on vacation I was working, which was, my family was out having fun, on the vineyard. They're all splashing around, making sandcastles, and I'm, in the back trying to do a deal and get it done or having conversations. And I started to realize, wow, this is not living. So that was starting to see that there was something wrong with me, and the choices I was making.
Can I just, roughly what age were you at that point?
Gosh, I was, this was going back about 8 or 9 years ago. So okay. I was probably 32.
Okay. So well into your career, it wasn't like it was right out of college or something, right?
No. So I wish it was earlier so I could have spent a lot more time.
Right.
I felt like there was a lot of parts of who I was in those early days, the kind of the adventurer, the artist, that I had to start stuffing down and create a path to a more rigid and pragmatic person. And that's what I spent a lot of time creating.
So when you felt burnout, I don't want to overstate it, was part of it that artist trying to come out, that you were in maybe a job or a field that wasn't totally you, or was it just that you were kind of overworked?
Yeah, it was both.
Okay, yeah.
It was both. I mean, it's like we get stuck in patterns, right? And I think for me, I got stuck in a pattern of saying like, this is what I should want. This is what I should be doing. And, this is the pattern I was in. I often talk about climbing the right mountain it's the first book that I wrote, is this idea that like you get on the mountain and you decide, well, the next step is keep going. But sometimes we have to question, well, wait a minute, am I on the right path in the first place? Do I enjoy the steps I'm taking to grow? And in reality, sometimes that wasn't my experience, even though there were accolades and there were people who celebrated the work I did. I realized that, maybe I wasn't on the right path for me, and I was always questioning. There was always a sense of like, what else could be possible? Or like, what else is available to me in this path? But I still put my head down and said, keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I also think it's actually, and it happens when now I'm 50, so it still happens, right? I still am I on the right mountain all the time? And to me, it's a little more terrifying the older I get, because it takes a lot of work and energy to climb a new mountain. So how do you counsel and help coach people through that? If it's a scary question to ask, if am I climbing the right mountain? It's easier not to ask it, I think.
Exactly. It's easier to put your head down and keep on barreling through. The reality is that's only going to worsen the problem for you, because you'll find yourself a few years later and then saying like, gosh, I wish I'd made that step. I wish I had taken this action. Because life is short. I don't mean to be like a pessimist in that regard, but like, we have to, value the time we have on this planet. And I think the key thing for people who come to me and say, hey, like, what if I'm on the wrong planet, the wrong mountain? What can I do? And what should I be thinking about no matter where I am, whether I'm 50 years old or, 30 years old or even 70 years old? What are some steps that I can and should be making? And I think the key thing is that it's never too late. And you should start by thinking back to some of the things that you have accumulated on your journey, and how can you take the inventory of all the skills and experiences that you've done and use them as fuel to move you in the right direction, or making a slight pivot to get onto that right mountain. It doesn't mean throwing away your past. It means honoring and including it and transcending from there, and using it as a fuel to a new chapter, whatever that chapter might look like.
Have you sort of put together kind of a system to help folks do this? Is that what the book is about? Is that what you spend your time doing?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Getting people to think differently. And this is one of the things that like I've done with a lot of people, is this idea that, it was reflected back on me, that as I started coaching people, and this is before I really had a system, is this idea that like every time I meet with you, I feel, first of all, very grounded. And that's a word that I didn't know much about, but I started to learn a lot about that. And I also feel very expansive. And because I get people to think, about options and opportunities that are available to them that we often don't think are available to us, because again, we get stuck in these patterns. And so the key thing is that people have to have a different mindset and mindset shift and say, well, wait a minute, this path that I'm on is not completely set in stone. It's something we can change if we want to. So allowing them to shift their perspective allows them to see opportunities, and even those opportunities that are available to them could be something that's just an experiment that they can try, and it's not fatal if they take an experiment and it doesn't work out. Right?
It strikes me, and when I look back at my own life and just my friends, like often something like disruptive happens, sometimes outside of your control. So you lose your job, or someone close to you dies, or something happens, and it naturally makes you question everything and put you in a position to start over. Is it possible to will yourself to that kind of change, or do you have to have that kind of outside? What's your experience been with that? Can you just sort of decide to change, or do you kind of need an impetus?
You can absolutely will yourself to change, if you will. I'll say it like that. Yeah. But you don't need a catastrophic event to make something happen in your life. The key thing is you have to change the way you look at the things that are happening in your life. Yeah. And I think that's why I always talk about these 3 C's that I call them the 3 C's of grounded leadership. And that is curiosity, compassion, and connection. And so curiosity comes from the reality of we need to look at things with a lot of curiosity. What's really going on here? What's possible? What is around me that I maybe haven't been paying attention to, that could be a spark of inspiration that will pull me into a different direction, or potentially a shift in where I want to go. Because, I don't need a dramatic change in my life. What I might just need is look at things differently. Yeah. I might just have to look at my job differently. It doesn't mean I have to leave my job, and maybe I just need to look at how I can grow differently in my role. Compassion is about, really honoring who you are and being okay with the imperfectness that you have. There's scars and wounds that we have that we oftentimes are afraid to touch because they're still harsh and they still hurt. And I think we need to have compassion with ourselves and say, okay, it's okay to feel some pain. But the pain is part of who we are, and we have to honor that. So that's where the compassion comes in. And then connection is about not just connecting with others, which is obviously where we start to get into the first place of like, oh, I got to have conversations. I got to talk to people. Absolutely. But we have to first start with connecting with ourselves. There's almost like a reconciling of who am I? What do I really want? Who do I want to become? And what do I want to be? Before starting to get out there and having conversations with other people about like what's possible. I need to really get clear about my own story, my own being.
Tony, you do have a weird superpower that comes through. And it is like a grounding thing. It's like talking to a great therapist or almost like a priest or something. Like where's that come from? Like it's just in you. I'm curious because your background on paper, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Absolutely. And I don't know where it came from, to be honest with you. I think I've always had it secretly, and I've always been someone who listens to other people and with intention and wants to know what lights them up. But I hid that for so long, and I think it's pent up. And so now I'm unleashing it on all of you. So no, but thank you. I really am honored to hear that.
Yeah, you have a way to create safety. That is just maybe innate or God-given. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
So I'm just curious, as you work with folks, any themes or anything you sort of expect if someone says, hey, I just need your help. I need you to coach me up a little bit. You've been doing this a little while. For all the folks listening right now that are leading, some folks leading a couple people, some leading thousands. When you just think of a leader, what do you kind of expect they might need to work on, or any themes that would come up in your work?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is this idea that like they want to make an impact without burning out. And what starts to come up first and foremost is this idea of creating leverage. How do I do more with less, or get more done with less? But the more is not just a simple like, oh, okay, more widgets. It's about being more impactful. Like, how do you create that sense of like, what is it that I do that makes a difference? And then find the space to be able to create capacity for other people to take on some of the other steps that are not meant for me.
Yeah.
And this is, a model I use with a lot of people is this idea that, you have to expand your vision and narrow your focus. And I think the two have to come together it's very important that you use both. Expanding your vision allows you to see possibilities, but then you have to narrow down and say, okay, so what is my focus that I'm going to do that's going to make a difference? Yeah. And that might require some delegation, some outsourcing, or just generally just saying no to some things that are good, might be a good thing to do, but maybe not right now.
I'm sure for some folks, it's probably easier to expand their vision, and for some, it's easier to focus.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you can do about that is you don't have to throw them away. You just write it all down, like getting things out of your head and having a notebook of like future possibilities. Like, someday I want to be, a pilot. Right. That doesn't have to be something, unless it's something you want to be as a profession. That's fantastic. But if that's something that's a dream of yours that you want to explore, put it on the list. Say, it's a dream of mine. It's in the bucket list category, if you will. And you can, have it there.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I'd like to write a book. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Put them all there, but don't keep them here. Because what happens is that takes up a lot of space. What you want to know is what's on my list right now that I want to focus on, that's going to give me the most energy. And do that. That way you're not like I have shiny object syndrome for sure. I have this challenge of trying to like figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
And in fact, my next TED talk is about limiting your possibilities. I want to give the whole thing away, but it's about how do you focus when you most need to, and limit the possibilities, because it is hard.
Yeah. What was your first TED talk?
My first TED talk was "Don't check yourself at the door: How to share more of your true self
Okay.
in the workplace." Yes.
Well, everybody can find that online, but any Cliff's notes from it?
Absolutely. I mean, I share in this, this talk is about really sharing more of who we are authentically, our weird, embracing the weird things about us that we often shy away from sharing because we feel like they might alienate us or create something about us that, people might, judge us for. And it's the big things, but it's also the little things that we don't even think are that important. I had some people who I've worked with in the past who are like, one is a violin playing virtuoso who like is a data scientist, but people at her work never would know that she was a violin playing virtuoso. And then I encouraged her. I said, you should share that with some people. Let them know who you are outside of work. And she did. And then people started showing up to her concerts and celebrating her, and like they got to know her, and she felt more connected to the people around her. And I think that's the beauty of that type of an experience. It's no different than looking at like a Patagonia or a Microsoft, where they want to celebrate who we are inside and outside of work.
Yeah. The bring your whole self to work sort of movement. I think, we value authenticity, and certainly the folks and younger generations do as well. And I think it helps to know you can go to a place where you're accepted, right? And people are curious. I'm curious when it comes to burnout specifically, because I think a lot of folks made career changes during COVID. And you would think maybe there would be less burnout coming out of it. But I anecdotally have heard more of my friends in leadership say, I just feel more burnout than I did before. So I'm just curious, any lessons or thoughts you have around the stage that we are in, having come out of that a couple of years ago, and the decisions people made during it. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I've come to see and realize, I guess, is there's two things. Number one, when we came out of the pandemic, there's been an indelible mark on who we are as a society, is that we want more meaning in the work we do. We're not just going to march back into work and do the same things as we did them before. We need to have a real reason for doing them. And it's not just the paycheck. So we need to have more meaning in the work, and we need to have the word that I keep on saying over and over again, the connection has to be more meaningful too. So I'll call it intentional connection is an important part of this. People are spending time in work, and when they go to work, especially physically, they want to make sure that the people they're connecting with are people they want to be with, not just forced to be with. And so I think those two parts of it are what have changed our relationship with work. It's not just a place to collect a paycheck. It's our place to build relationships, to find meaning. And so with all that being said, it puts a lot of onus on the leaders in the world to make sure that those elements are there, that there's meaning and there's connection. And it's not just inauthentic and forced, but it's natural and real, and it feels like it's come together in a way that fosters a better environment.
Yeah, I love that. We've had a lot of folks on here talk about how the challenge of doing that over Zoom, basically, right? When there was so much of interconnection was just kind of walking around. And now you have to be intentional about it, but not cheesy and not weird. And it is a hard thing to figure out for sure.
You can't just march in and say like, okay, everybody, share your story. Tell me your story.
Right.
You have to kind of you got to set the container, create the safe space and allow people to say like, hey, we're ready to come together. We want to get to know people. We want to know what's real for you. What lights you up? And, what makes you come alive? Because the more we get to know each other, the more impact we can have together.
We do on our platform, we have lunch and learns that folks can access anytime, and they're world-class 30-minute talks, which are amazing. But the real work is done in just the guide that we give folks, the questions they can talk about afterwards, and I think I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, we want to do the equivalent of like axe throwing and like, we try to do a Zoom game or something. And sometimes those work, but a lot of times it just feels like, what are we doing? So really trying to find those meaningful moments where you forget you're on a screen and it actually does feel like we're having a real conversation right now, like we are right now. Look, we're running out of time. You're part of the LeaderCast. I've sucked you in now. You're part of the LeaderCast family. We will have you around again doing something, I'm sure, if you will do that. I do want to ask, I guess I'm just imagining folks listen to this like in their commute in or whatever. I know I've been at a place when I was at a job where I was beyond burnout. I was fried. Like I had depression. It took everything for me just to get out of bed and go do the job. And there's someone right now that's exactly like that. And when you're at that point, what should we do? Like, what do we do when we just know we're really, really, really burnt out?
Yeah. Think about people who you want to live for. What do you want to live for? Who are the people in your life? It's not the what, it's the who. And that is the starting point, and think about who it is that, that embodies all the things that you want to put out into the world. And that might be your partner, your child. When I think about my darkest moments, I think about my son and, how my life is all about being there for him and having those moments with him. And if I'm burning myself out in this process or feeling like I'm in this dark moment because I've created all these choices that led me down this path, maybe I need to reverse that back and say, what do I have? What am I living for? I'm living for these people. And how am I making choices for those people to be there for them?
That's awesome. I would have never thought just reverse, ask who instead of what. And that's as good as gold, man. Just to change the what to who. Because I think in doing that, if I put myself back in time at that time in my life, I would have realized I'm actually hurting the folks I love because I'm so miserable. So I got to do something, which is ultimately what happened with me,
Yeah. And it also has you thinking about what you truly value, because your values are not aligned to who you are. They've gotten aligned with something that to your what, not your who.
That's so good. Thank you, Tony. It was awesome to meet you. Hey, this feels like one of those podcasts where people are going to write in and say, could you just have talked less and let him talk more? Because I thought everything you said was just amazing and great. For folks that want to connect with you, whether it's get your book or reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The best place is my website. It's at ipurposepartners.com. And you can find my book there and what have you. My books are available everywhere, Amazon, bookstores and what have you. But the other place you can find me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active there at Tony Martignetti with a 1, not an I at the end. Too many Tony Martinettis out there, I guess.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, but yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't think.
Great. Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll stay in touch. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Jeff.